Hey guys, let's talk about horror movies because it's almost October. It's not almost October, but it is if you think about it. Um, I know, I'm the one who just said that summer was going by too fast and I didn't want it to go by, and I don't, but I do love Halloween and I do love horror movies. But I can watch them year round and then go to the beach the next day. It's fine. So, the different types of horror movies. We have kind of like the creepy, um, gothic horror movie. Like we have things like Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre and stuff like that. And then we have the movies like, or I'm thinking literature and movies, I guess, together, but like Dracula, Frankenstein, The Invisible Man. We have some that are science based. We have some that are kind of religion based, kind of things like The Exorcist and Poltergeist, and kind of the different spirit worlds and the good versus evil. And you throw a priest or two in there, some nuns, things like that. We've got the Conjuring movies, Amityville, um, people's lives being haunted and people being possessed by demons and things like that. And then you've got the out and out slasher against society, kind of Halloween, Friday the 13th, um, Nightmare on Elm Street, stuff like that. And then you've got kind of the society as the horror, 1984, Handmaiden to some degree. Um, I think of like the Hunger Games or things like that, or the Purge, where society is kind of the problem. They're kind of fixing something or trying to make something happen by an act of violence, like the Purge or Hunger Games or the Lottery. Um, the Lottery by Shirley Jackson, not the actual gambling lottery. I'm kind of a fan of gambling at times, but I digress. But the last couple of nights, I have watched these movies that are alarming as a woman. And I don't know what the term is. And if I have any horror movie buffs out there, what's the term for like a real life horror? Like a horror that's actually happening um, because of society or because of a situation, but like real life horror, like this stuff has happened and it can be proved and it's like real. I'm not talking about like, you know, aliens coming from another planet. I'm not talking about poltergeists. I'm not talking about demonic possession. I'm talking about like the real horror that people are against each other. Closer to like a serial killer thing, but not really because it's more accepted by society. Um, Here's what I'm getting at. The first movie that I watched was about maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was called The Lies We Tell. It was set in the 1860s in Ireland. And it was about a girl who her father passed away and the estate was put into the care of her um, uncle, who was her closest living relative, but not really somebody that she knew. So the uncle shows up and he's got his son and his daughter with him. And there's like a nanny for the daughter or like a governess for the daughter. Um, but he gets there. She's grateful for the help. He slowly starts to control everything. He's the guardian. There's a couple people that are supposed to oversee everything, but as time goes on, there's a lot of gaslighting, a lot of making her look crazy. They're trying to get the money from the estate out from under her. There's, as they make her look crazier and crazier, um, there's actually an assault that takes place. And nobody believes nobody believes her. They don't let her go to town. They don't let her be around other people. She's sick or she's inconsolable and she's, you know, whatever, whenever anyone is around, you know, and the doctors are on board with she's not quite right, she's under a lot of stress, she needs to rest. And the real horror of that is that in the past, and maybe it's like this in other countries, I'm not sure, but certainly in the past, in most countries, if a woman was left um, alone, somebody would be put in charge of the estate until she could manage it later. And she would have to be, kind of like everything would have to be kind of overseen by a male heir until she married. Well, what if she didn't want to marry? And it got into this really deep place in my head because, we're not too far from, like, when I was born in 1972, and it was right about that time that women could get credit cards. Women could not purchase cars around the time that I was born without a male relative signing. Um, we're not that far. I'm 53 years old. We're not that far from me not being able to open a credit card. I mean, we are in the sense that it's been 53 years, but it's in my lifetime. And it's crazy to me. And so the real horror was this girl, there was nobody to help her. There were these, country estates. We didn't have, like, there wasn't like telephones in every home. There wasn't like a next door neighbor that was going to hear anything. They were isolated, and the relatives could pretty much do whatever they wanted to do and get away with it because there was nobody coming to help them. And, today we have a few more things in place, thank God. We've got the Child Protective Services. We've got, people who are kind of looking out for their neighbors and things like that. But I'm sure there's still a lot of horrifying things that go on. And I thought, rather than thinking you saw a ghost or you felt a chill when you walked through a certain room, I mean, the real horror is knowing that somebody could come in and completely control this girl's life and take away everything that her family had left her, um, just because there was no one to protect her. And, that she could be assaulted in her own home by people her father had put in charge of the estate because it was supposed to be what was best for her. And it's just mind blowing. And the next one that I watched last night, and I'm not going to be allowed to pick movies anymore, but I watched The Yellow Wallpaper. I don't know if you're familiar with The Yellow Wallpaper, but it was so progressive that I actually thought that maybe it was written by somebody recently, like the 1990s or the 2000s, but it was actually written in the 1800s, and it was written by somebody who lived in, she was born in Connecticut. She actually went to some branch of Rhode Island School of Design, and she wrote this book called Yellow Wallpaper. And her name, I wrote it down because I hadn't heard of her before, Charlotte Perkins Gilman. And she had been married twice. I haven't like researched. This is for you guys to rabbit trail if you want to. I'm just going to give you the gist of the movie. And I'm not even suggesting it as a movie, I'm just suggesting it as a topic of what real horror feels like to me. So, basically, this woman was married to a doctor, a very busy doctor who was always away. And there were a couple of people that lived in the house with them, like maids, servants, nannies, whatever. I'm not sure what their actual role was, but they primarily, so they had a kid, the husband and the wife, and the baby was being taken care of by this nanny or this housemaid, because the the mom, the wife, had postpartum depression, and her husband was, and this is a horror on a couple of different levels. It's horror on the level of, was he doing this to be cruel, or was that really all he knew? Because it wasn't really a recognized thing, this being sad after you have a baby. It wasn't really recognized as the serious diagnosis that it is today. Where, I mean, think Andrea Yates. I mean, a lot of really horrifying things have happened because of postpartum. And thank God I never had anything like that. I've had close friends and relatives that had it, and it's really devastating. You've got a couple of different things going on there. You've got them, feeling their feelings, for one thing. They are devastated, they're depressed, everything's very dark. On the other hand, they're also feeling that guilt because they're supposed to be happy and they're not, and they're wondering what's wrong with them. And there's been a lot of debates about this. I think most famously there was like the Tom Cruise Brooke Shields debate, because she wrote a book about it and he spoke out against medicating. um, I don't know what side of, medicine you guys fall on, but it's horrifying to me that, like, this topic as a horror movie is, I mean, this was based on this woman's true experiences with her husband. She was married twice, and the first husband was a doctor. And so she was under the care of the physician who was also her husband. And it was a rest cure. And that may have been the cure back then. That may have been just all they knew to do. So the things that this woman enjoyed, one of which was writing, she was not allowed to do because she was supposed to be resting. And if the maid who was taking care of her newborn, because she couldn't, discovered that she was writing, she would report to the husband that, that she was writing and she wasn't supposed to be. Now, the reality, and I'm sure what we know about this, is that probably the writing gave her dopamine and gave her good feelings and made her feel a little bit better, because you could see a turnaround in her when she would do things like that. She would feel a little bit better about herself, and then it would be taken away from her again because she was supposed to be resting. And, they were giving her medicine. I don't know what they gave her for medicine. I did not read the book, and the movie didn't have like all the details of everything. There were some hallucinations and things that some things were real, some things weren't real. Um, but it made me think about horror movies and real life situations. And and God bless you if you're still with me on this one, because this video is a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. But um, sometimes the real horror is the positions that we are in and we cannot get out of. The most terrified I've ever been in my life was in my marriage, when nobody believed what was going on, and I felt like everyone, including the courts, were against me, and nobody knew what was happening. And it was scary. And I was being put into a position that was, whether he did it or not, if he had followed a handbook, he could not have executed this plan more perfectly. In retrospect, it was all, oh, I should have done more to help you. And, um, I regret a lot of things that I did. But at the time, I was being, he was um, trying to get me help, when really he was the one causing the issues. And it was a devastating, horrific, triggering thing that I've really had to work through. And so sometimes these movies kind of traumatize me on a horror level that might be more real than if you just watched it and you didn't have that in your past. You might just watch it and it might not be as traumatic as it was for me. But I was thinking about the real horror. And There are, horror situations like Friday the 13th where, yeah, there are actual serial killers that do, go and hurt people and, you know, kill several people over periods of time. And, those things are real. But when I think back sometimes to the horror movie scenes that have really alarmed me, I think that in The Lies We Tell, her assault is going to be one of the most traumatic things I've seen. Um, the frustration in Yellow Wallpaper when she goes to take the baby from the nanny and the baby starts screaming when the mother takes the baby, and the look of satisfaction on the nanny's face is just chilling. It's horrifying. And like in Pet Cemetery, when the little boy gets killed by the logging truck, the original Pet Cemetery, not the new movie. They did the daughter, I think, in the new movie, but um, things like that are devastating. And, the loss of a child, the postpartum depression, having your rights taken away from you as an adult, as a human being, as a woman, um, it's all scary. It's all horror. And I think there's a Stephen King quote. I don't know it. I'm not even going to attempt it. I'm going to kind of paraphrase it. But he basically talked about how he writes horror to kind of soften like the how scary things really are. Like it's almost like blowing it up. It's almost like just like taking our everyday horrors and just making them a thousand times worse, because not only does that family lose their child in Pet Cemetery, but they then, try to save him, try to bring him back, and he's never the same again. And then he ends up being, you know, a murderer. And, it's like they take a normal, everyday, what's horrific enough, and they kind of blow it up. And I think these last couple of movies that I watched really did that. And I don't think I'll be reading the books because I think I got enough out of the movies to traumatize me for a while. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. I love horror movies. You guys know that. And um, I watch a lot of true crime, things like that. And I think part of it is because there's so much to be scared of. Sometimes I feel like you watch stuff like that and it makes you appreciate all of the moments that none of that stuff is happening to you. Excuse me. um but it's true though. It's like there's the horror of what I'm going through right now with my dad and dementia. When I sit at that table and I look at that man who raised me and loved me and provided for me, and I don't know if he has any idea who I am, that's a horror movie right there. That's a real life thing that we're going through. And anytime that we are not going through those moments, I am so grateful for it. Um, an afternoon with my daughters, this trip to Miami, just yesterday going to that garden and just sitting out there and listening to the birds and smelling the flowers and feeling the sun on my skin and just breathing and just knowing that in that moment I was okay and I was safe is such a blessing, because the real horrors are around us. And, it's not necessarily a poltergeist in our TV, it's, real life. And we need to be grateful for those moments. Sorry, I'm so depressing today. I love you guys. Take care.